today by Dr. Larry Riley, Professor of Biology in the Fresno State College of Science and Mathematics. Jason McGinsey, an instructional designer here in the Fresno State Office of Ideas, joined by my colleague William Hardaway, another instructional designer here on the Ideas team. So we're going to talk to Dr. Riley today about his experience in the program Equity-Minded Pedagogy. That William was the mind behind that here at Fresno State. So before we get into talking about Equity-Minded Pedagogy or EMP, can you share a little bit about the classes and the students that you teach?
As Jason mentioned, I'm a professor in biology, and I teach primarily seniors. I teach a comparative animal physiology course, and these are typically last semester seniors, and it also includes a laboratory section as well.
As we get into talking about Equity-Minded Pedagogy, William, for anyone who's listening or watching who may be unfamiliar, can you give them the elevator pitch, what that program is?
It's supposed to help faculty approach the classroom in a different way. So in terms of inclusion and equity in the classroom, a lot of times if we just go from our POV as an individual, we're oftentimes leaving groups out, even though we might think we're approaching it objectively as a professor or something like that. And so the community of practice is geared to give people multiple perspectives and tools to be able to foster more inclusion and equity in the classroom.
So, Dr. Riley, what was it that made you sign up for this program, and then what was the learning experience like?
So I was in the last cohort, so last semester, and I had wanted to do it the year prior, I believe, or the year even before that, when it was just held just for Fresno State. So this one was, I think, 6 or 7 other CSU campuses. And what I guess the reason why I signed up is some of my own personal growth I was doing, and also I'm the pre-medical advisor, and just noticing when I was advising them how disconnected I was to their experiences, their culture, things they experience are very different than what I've experienced. And then I started thinking, well, I can do better in the classroom, but I don't know how. So I actually have talked with a couple of our colleagues who are our science educators and using evidence-based teaching. They gave me some pointers and some ideas, but it was like I know I can do better. I just don't know how. And so yeah, I signed up for this course. Was pretty much that particular reason, because I started to recognize and pay attention to some of the examples I was using in class. They're examples I'm familiar with. That doesn't mean everyone in the class is familiar with the examples I'm giving. So it's like, okay, how can I bridge that gap? How can I maybe get more kind of student buy-in, student engagement? And personally, it's just, I want to be able to understand outside of the classroom. Also want to be able to, how do I relate? How can I be more empathetic to other cultures, other people's, what they've experienced that are much different than mine. So it's kind of beyond even the classroom experience as well.
So taking all of that in, what did you take away that you may have tried to implement, or was there something you did as you were going through that you tried to do with students, and then how has that gone?
Well, the initial takeaway was, man, I'm doing it wrong. I have a lot of things to change, but then realize, if I can just change one thing a semester, that's all I need to do, just little things. And, at the beginning of the course, I have to admit, I was a little bit like, where is this going? Because it started with data. And I'm like, that's not what I had thought this course was going to be. But I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to fight it. Let's just go with it. And then I kind of saw the reasoning behind understanding the data to help, influence kind of the decisions I can make in the classroom.
Can you talk about the data that you were looking at?
Oh, God.
Or just generally? Or just
OIE data.
Okay.
And I'm still trying to understand the whole OIE data that there is. But for me, I really focused on the number of Black students in College of Science and Math, because that's work that I am currently doing. So I really wanted to see, what is kind of like the 4-year graduation rate, the 6-year graduation rate. What is the retainment? In not, I don't know how many students have maybe not completed, but may have started off as a STEM student in College of Science and Math, but they're not graduating. And I need to look further into that. But that's kind of where I kind of started my investigation, or with the data. But then seeing how things progressed, the one that really stood out to me of the activities was our syllabus. How can I make my syllabus clear for the students to understand what each activity or assessment that I'm doing, why it is important? And so some of the changes, and I actually met with William earlier today, and one change that I had anticipated to do, because I changed my syllabus, but I forgot to use that particular syllabus at the beginning of this semester. It had the importance of student and office hours. So I explained what's the value of those. And, I may post it on Canvas just so they have that information. And then one thing I did do at the beginning of the class was, okay, I come in and I'm like, okay, this is how I'm going to assess you. You're going to have this many tests, this often, this much homework, this much this much that. And I'm like, they're seniors, let's have a little fun with this. So I'm like, so the first day of class was like, okay, how do you want to be assessed? And so they got in groups, and I said, I have final say. There's a couple of things I want to include, but I'd like to see how would you like to be assessed, and what percentage of your grade will each of those different assessments account for? And surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly, but it was for me initially, was it really wasn't that far off from what I normally do. They wanted to have like a midterm, I call them mini midterms, every other week. They like having that, versus only one student said, I just want a midterm and a final. But everyone else was every other week. They did not want homework. And I'm okay with that, because I'm not a big fan of homework either. They wanted participation, and I'm like, okay, how do I grade participation? And because I wanted to put it on them instead of just, oh yeah, we show up, you give us points. But they were like, let's do like Kahoot or the Socratic questions. And I said, okay, so that will be, half of the participation points. And the other half, I just came up with some weird idea of, I call it Monday morning madness, and it's really not that mad, but it's just Monday. Is I give the group, I give the entire class a question based upon material we learned this past week. One person takes the lead, and then on Monday morning, they just come and they explain that process, because it's a physiology course. So it's usually all about some sort of process mechanism. And so they explain it to the group, and then the group, they already knew the questions. They can fill in the blanks, they could correct it. And then afterwards, I open it up for questions. This week, no one had any questions, but the week before, they did. So we go through it at the beginning of class. And I think that's been helpful. The other thing that I've done is on the syllabus, and this is something we've talked in our department, is, what skills are we teaching our students? And so I have in there, if they apply for a job, here are some key words they can put on their application, that the skills that they're learning in this class. Because I do know, AI, they look for specific words, whether they're going to move your application to the next round or not. And so hopefully the students will pay attention to that. So that was really the big one, was the syllabus, which then, as I'm talking about it, has really kind of directed, my teaching. And there's other additional things I want to change in the coming years. But that's what I've done so far this semester.
Larry, before you went through the experience and you thought about like making change, did you think about it? And you might have alluded to this a little bit earlier too. Did you think about it like as this massive, impossible thing, or did you think about, well, maybe if I just change this one little thing and,
So I think probably 4 4 years ago, yes, I thought I had to change my entire course because that's when I met with our science, our biology science educators, and I felt overwhelmed. I'm like, I'm never going to do it. It's just too much. And then they're like, just change one thing. I'm like, oh, makes sense. And so then what I did is I implemented a couple of video projects. Because I didn't want to do typical PowerPoint. They do enough of that in science. They do enough of that sort of poster presentations. I wanted to see a little bit of their creativeness. So they have to create a 5 to 10 minute video on a topic. And it can be anything they want. And most of them do like a newscast. So someone's the news person behind the desk, and then they have a roving reporter, and then someone they ask. And I have learned quite a bit of information that way myself, things that I may not have known, and I can see that the students have put the effort into it. So it's like, okay, they're taking ownership of their own learning, and they're learning things, this particular way. And plus, I just want to see some creativeness, and some of them have make some funny videos, which of course I always enjoy laughing. And some are a little bit more serious, but I mean, those are just as good. So I want to try to figure out how to do a little bit more of that.
When you gave the students the opportunity to design or to lay out sort of how they would be assessed, how did they respond to being given that opportunity? Were they apprehensive that you were telling them the truth and that you were gonna like as long as or that you had something in mind and as long as they gave you what you wanted, you'd be happy? Or how much latitude did you feel like you were comfortable giving the students to come up with those ideas?
They were initially like, what? And I'm like, yes, I want you to decide how you want to be assessed in this course. And at that point, I think I felt, I'll give them about 60 to 70% latitude. But then as we were writing stuff on the board, I was like, they pretty much have 90% of latitude. I mean, there was it was the video projects I wanted to keep in. I was okay getting rid of the homework questions because I only did 3 or 4 during the semester. And yeah, so it turned out that they really had, and they believed because I wrote it out. And then before I posted the official syllabus, I said, this is what, we came up with as a class. Do you have any feedback? And no one had any feedback. So it's like, okay, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, and so the interesting thing that you said when you initially told the story is that like it wasn't too far off in terms of alignment with what y'all were gonna do anyway. And I think like for the listeners, they might hear that and be like, oh, if I do that one time, then I can predict that it's gonna be the same. But really it's dependent on that particular group. And what's interesting is the power in doing that is not like that they come up with some perfect formula of assignments and everything like that, but they have buy-in to like, oh, we've engaged in creating this, laying this out, and we considered all of our challenges and how we might mitigate some of those through this, and they have more confidence in pursuing those assessments.
Because one thing with it is the percentage of the course that's on their kind of mini midterms is about 10% less than I had done in the past. Some of the other things carry a little bit more weight. I'm like, all right, let's just try it. I mean, to me, it's a senior level class. And so I feel like I have a little bit more latitude than some of our introductory courses to try some things. And so I'm like, all right, we'll just see what happens.
So you mentioned that you had some other future plans that you may be interested in, adding one more thing to
Yeah.
experimenting with that. So yeah,
One
what do you
thing
have in mind?
one thing I really struggle with is still getting the students engaged in discussions during the class period. Um, I'm still trying to figure out how to let them be uncomfortable with not knowing and having to look things up. But I also find what's interesting is when I ask a question, I have to say, well, ask Google. I mean, it's amazing how they don't go right to the internet. And I mean, that's what I do. I mean, even a lot of the questions I ask, I don't know the answer to. And so I'm Googling it too. I want to know. And so it's having them, how do I create kind of that environment um, where that are a little bit more comfortable in having that. And, I have a class of 36 and there's like 3 students that are fairly comfortable, but it's getting the others. I think one thing I'm going to try, something I've done in the past is I've made they're little animals I found online, and I cut them out and I glued them to popsicle sticks. And each group will be an animal. And so I have 6 tables in the room. Is instead of like one of the Monday morning things, instead of having them discuss it within their tables, is I'll ask a question and it'll be like a competition in a sense. And so instead of hitting a buzzer, they got to raise their animal up. And in the past, I made them actually have to make the sound of the animal, which is a lot of fun when it's a crocodile or a giraffe, because they're like, well, what sound does it make? And I don't know, make it up. And that seems to get them. And I bring in a treasure box, and whatever table gets it right, and what I'll do is have each person, in that group will have to be a leader that day, so everyone has the opportunity, to raise it. And, if they get it wrong, they can throw the rest of their table under the bus and say, well, they told me it was the answer. So just trying to find ways to help alleviate that anxiety of being wrong and talking in class and being wrong.
And there's been a lot of research, especially recently, about bringing play into the classroom and lowering some of that anxiety. So that's great. My last question, and William, you may have one more at the end here, but if there's another faculty member out there who is where you were when you said, I can do better in the classroom, but I don't know how, what advice would you have for that faculty member?
It's I think what we expect our students to do is we'll take a chance. Try something new. I mean, we as a parent, right, we kind of want our students to do things, get out of your comfort zone. And I think as faculty, we get a little bit too comfortable. Get out of your comfort zone, try something. It's not a whole lot of time. It does take some time out of your normal day, but it's not a whole lot. And at the end of the day, you may not like it at all, and that's perfectly fine too. Or you may find 1 or 2 things that can change. And that's what I found through this program that I did, is there are a couple things that I know I'm able to do, now. And there's some things that I'm not able to do right now. And maybe at some point I will be able to.
To that point, I guess my last question is, because I have colleagues that also get in that mode where they want to change something, but they're just kind of stuck. And so I'm wondering, when you initially looked at the data, because I remember, like, way back when I started first interacting with OIE, I would always hear things like, oh, the Southeast Asian graduation rates are pretty bad, or Black student graduation rates are bad. We got to get them higher, blah, blah, blah. And that it felt different when I actually looked at the data and saw, like, through semester after semester after semester, what that was going up and down, up and down, up and down. So was that a moment for you where you had a different reaction actually seeing it? And did you hear rumors like that before, or were you aware already?
I was already aware, at least with our Black students, because I had already started kind of looking at some OIE data before then. What really opened my eyes, or what kind of jumped out at me, was how much better our transfer students do in graduating than our first-time freshmen do in graduating. And that I was like, huh, okay. So, I mean, that I don't know what that means, what I can do with that, but it was just something that really kind of stood out to me.
Dr. Larry Riley, thank you so much for talking with us today. Good luck in your continued experimentation and growth in the classroom.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
To learn more, visit our website, academics.fresnostate.edu/ideas, or contact us to share your story, ideas@mail.fresnostate.edu.